In this important hearing. We are going to be in the middle of votes throughout the hearing, but in the interest of your time, we're going to try to work through this hearing, and Senator Romney and I and Senator Schatz will go back and forth to votes. We'll have other colleagues joining us over the course of the morning. Today we are considering 4 nominations: Caroline Kennedy to be Ambassador to the Commonwealth of Australia, Philip Goldberg to be Ambassador to the Republic of Korea, Mary Kay Carlson to be Ambassador to the Republic of the Philippines, and Mark Nathanson to be Ambassador to the Kingdom of Norway. Let me begin by welcoming our nominees and your families. We are thankful for your willingness to serve. I'm going to give some brief opening remarks, hand it over to Senator Romney, and we've got a few of our colleagues to help us with introductions. If confirmed, you are all going to take your oath of office at a critical point in world history. Just this week, we have seen the horrific images from Ukraine. We have seen a country turn into a crime scene where there is irrefutable evidence of brutality against civilians by Russia's forces. These actions demand accountability, both for the soldiers who perpetrated these atrocities and the officials in the Kremlin who ordered them. We have seen countries from around the world step up to impose unprecedented costs on Russia for its unjustified and unprovoked war of aggression on Ukraine. Last month, each of the 4 countries we are here to talk about today joined an overwhelming majority of the world at the UN General Assembly in condemning the Russian invasion and supporting greater humanitarian access in Ukraine. We know that maintaining that unity amongst allies and partners will be crucial. Ambassador Kennedy, let me begin by thanking you for your continued service to this country. And let me say a few words about Australia, one of our most important partners in the Indo-Pacific. The recently announced AUKUS Security Pact, of which I am a great champion, takes our bilateral partnership to a new level and will further advance the exchange of defense capabilities, including supporting the acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines for the Australian Navy. But our cooperation goes far beyond the security sector. President Biden has placed a priority on strengthening the reach and coordinating power of the Quad, so that the United States and Australia, along with the other members, can help work together on COVID-19 vaccines, climate change, technological innovation, and regional competition. The Quad format shows tremendous promise in its ability to convene regional democracies to solve collective challenges and to present a contrast to China's increasingly assertive posture in the Indo-Pacific. Ambassador Goldberg, as you well know, throughout your wealth of experience in the Foreign Service, South Korea is one of our oldest and most important partners in Asia. Since 1953, our mutual defense treaty has been ironclad. We now have nearly 30,000 troops based in South Korea, and I applaud the administration's success in negotiating a new cost-sharing agreement with the South Korean government. After competitive elections that ended last month, which included not only contentious debate on domestic issues, but also outlined competing policies in how South Korea will address the challenges from North Korea and China, there's going to be a new president taking office in May, and we look forward to working with you as you tell us more about how you're going to work with the incoming president. Ms. Carlson, the United States and the Philippines have a special relationship through shared history, cultures, defense cooperation, economic relations, close people-to-people ties. The Philippines' strategic location, bordering the South China Sea and proximity to Taiwan, undergirds the importance of our defense relationship. They've been a major non-NATO ally since 2003. Despite those close security ties, democratic backsliding throughout the course of President Duterte's time in office has been troubling. Senator Schatz and I were part of the first congressional delegation to meet with President Duterte in Manila shortly after his election. And in that meeting, he was crystal clear about his objectives: to use any means possible to wage war on drug dealers and drug users. But the execution-style violence he has employed, frankly, so far surpassed my worst expectations. President Duterte has called President Putin his idol, a personal friend, while claiming that the Philippines would remain neutral in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Mr. Nathanson, the United States and Norway enjoy a long tradition of strong ties based on our shared democratic values. We share an interest in addressing the problems posed by climate change, particularly with respect to the Arctic, and collaborating with other Arctic states. On the security side, Norway, as you know, is a founding member of NATO and has been a crucial partner with us in strengthening the eastern flank of that alliance in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Norway is also the world's third largest exporter of natural gas and the fifth largest petroleum exporter, and is poised to play a critical role in stabilizing energy markets that are roiled by Russia's war in Ukraine. These are incredibly important bilateral relationships, made more important by the crisis that our friends in Ukraine are embroiled in today, and we look forward to having a robust discussion with you today about these important posts. We have a few of our colleagues here to help us with introductions, and so let me, before we do that, let me turn it over to Senator Romney for opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, those of you who are willing to serve our country yet again in our service overseas. This is a critical time in the world's history. I met with leaders from an international body yesterday, and they said in some respects this is unprecedented. We have war, at the same time we have famine, at the same time we have a pandemic, all three hitting the world at the same time. And you will each represent our interests in parts of the world that are critical to promoting America's interests around the world. There are some who think we should simply forget the world and just return home and only think about what's happening here. I happen to believe that if we're truly interested in America's interests first, that means we need to be extensively involved in the world, making sure that the cause of freedom persists such that we can enjoy the economic vitality and peace that has been associated with, in large measure, with the last 70 years. And I want to thank each of you for your willingness and that of your families to be willing to serve yet again. You've been nominated to serve in countries that are obviously very important allies to the U.S., and those partnerships are going to become more important in the years ahead. The Honorable Ambassador Caroline Kennedy will be going to Australia, and as she knows, Australia is our steadfast partner and among our most important allies historically and today. Our partnership will remain critical in maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. I hope that, Ambassador Kennedy, that you're going to be able to work with our friends in Australia to identify new opportunities for bilateral and multilateral cooperation and to strengthen the already strong Quads relationship which we have. The Honorable Philip S. Goldberg, South Korea, as you know, is our most important ally in dealing with the ongoing threat of North Korea. And we need to work together to deter North Korea's aggression, to push the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to abandon its nuclear weapons program, to stop its belligerent actions, and to cease its illegal activity. Of course, our partnership goes beyond this single common threat. I hope you'll also approach your time as ambassador to recommit to our partnership and to find new ways to advance the interests which we have among freedom-loving countries and nations that follow the rule of law, to encourage China to begin to abide by those common rules. Ms. Mary Kay Loss Carlson, if confirmed, you'll be stepping into a vital role and will be tasked with perhaps rebuilding and strengthening our relationship with the Philippines. As the chairman has just indicated, our relationship with the Philippines has been strained with the current president expressing points of view which are antithetical to those that many of us hold. We're happy to see that the Visiting Forces Agreement was restored last year. We clearly have a good relationship with those who have the long-term interest of the region in their sights. I hope that you'll be able to work with our friends in the Philippines to find a much better path forward with regards to our common interest in human rights. Mr. Mark Nathanson, I don't have to tell you that NATO is pleased to have Norway as an important ally. Its geopolitical significance will only become more important as Russia and China attempt to change the rules of the road, particularly as they relate to their presence in the Arctic. I hope you'll use your time as ambassador to strengthen our cooperation with Norway, especially on those Arctic issues. And additionally, I hope you'll be able to work with our Norwegian allies to develop common or complementary responses when faced with threats from Russia and China. So to all of you, I appreciate your willingness to serve. It is a real commitment, and I hope the American people recognize that on the part of you and your families to go serve our country in a foreign place with so much happening in the world represents a sacrifice on your part and is one which I personally and I think all members of our committee deeply appreciate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Romney. Let me now turn to Senator Markey for purposes of an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. It is my pleasure to introduce Caroline Kennedy, who is nominated to be our next ambassador to the Commonwealth of Australia. Joining her in person is her husband, Ed, and her son, Jack, who, like Mom, once graced these halls as a Senate intern. We welcome them today as we all recognize Caroline Kennedy's tremendous achievements in diplomacy. Watching on this committee's live stream, no doubt, are Ambassador Kennedy's two daughters, Rose and Tatiana. Caroline Kennedy has statesmanship and public service in her DNA. Public service to kids in New York City. Public service in support of what her father called the moral cause of civil rights. And public service as our ambassador to Japan. She embodies the strength, integrity, poise, and humor that is necessary to serve our country in consequential times. Caroline was not a conventional ambassador. She has been a trailblazer as the first woman to serve as U.S. ambassador to Japan. She used her megaphone diplomacy to champion the rights of women, to deepen our alliance with Japan, and to skillfully navigate her key touch points in the bilateral relationship. She did the unconventional, from a bike ride to lift spirits ravaged by the 2021 earthquake, to donning a Santa Claus hat to reach youth on YouTube. But she also excelled in her more traditional duties. Japanese Foreign Minister Kishida, who is now Prime Minister of Japan, said of Caroline, she was an exceptionally tough negotiator. As a best-selling author and student of history, Caroline Kennedy was mindful of symbolism. President Kennedy's boat was sunk by the Japanese in World War II, the same war that saw the attack on Pearl Harbor and later the first and only use of nuclear weapons that ended the war at a great cost. As ambassador to Japan, Caroline played a key role to reconcile the painful legacy of war by facilitating President Barack Obama's historic visit to Hiroshima and helping Prime Minister Abe communicate directly with the American people at Pearl Harbor. Ambassador Kennedy is a fantastic pick for another key ally, Australia, the democratic anchor in the Indo-Pacific. Caroline and other members of her family started the Profiles in Courage Award in 1989. Past recipients include George Herbert Walker Bush, Ambassador Robert Ford, and a member of this committee, Senator Mitt Romney. As an educator, author, philanthropist, ambassador, and most of all, a proud mother, Caroline's life has been and will continue to be what we all believe is a profile in courage. And as chair of the East Asia Subcommittee, it has been my pleasure to work with Caroline Kennedy in her role in the Asian region. And I'm proud to support my friend, Caroline Kennedy, for this important post. She will do an absolutely great job. I urge swift confirmation for Ambassador Kennedy to this new and critical post.
Thank you very much, Senator Markey, and we know that votes are pending on the floor. But we appreciate you providing the introduction. Let me give some brief introductions of our other guests here today. We may be joined by another colleague for help in those introductions, and then we'll begin with testimony from our witnesses. We are also joined here today by Ambassador Philip Goldberg, our nominee to be ambassador to Korea. Ambassador Goldberg is completing his current assignment as ambassador to Colombia after previously serving at our embassy in Cuba and as our ambassador to the Philippines. After that, we have Ms. Mary Kay Loss Carlson, the nominee to be ambassador to the Philippines. Ms. Carlson is a career member of the State Department's Senior Foreign Service, having most recently served as the charge in Argentina. And finally, Mr. Nathanson is nominated to be ambassador to Norway. We're grateful for his significant service in the private sector, his active participation in matters of foreign affairs. We're grateful to have him before the committee, and I think we'll have a supplemental introduction. Let's start with you, Ambassador Kennedy. We welcome your opening remarks, and then we'll go down the panel. Just make sure your microphone is on.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ranking Member Romney, members of the committee, I want to also thank my friend, Senator Markey, for his very kind introduction and for being here today. It's an honor to appear before you this morning as the President's nominee to serve as the United States Ambassador to Australia. I'm grateful for the consideration of this distinguished committee, and I look forward to answering your questions and hearing firsthand your thoughts and concerns about our vital relationship with Australia. If confirmed, I look forward to working with you and other members of Congress to advance the interests of the United States, protect the safety of our citizens, and strengthen the bilateral relationship for the benefit of both our countries. I'd like to thank my family for their support during this process and their enthusiasm for this mission. My husband Ed and my son Jack are here with me, and my daughters and my new grandson are watching from home. Ed and I visited Australia on our honeymoon, and we were thrilled to return as a family in 2014. I'm humbled by this opportunity and the chance to be here today. I'll always be grateful to the Australian Coast Watchers and Solomon Islanders who rescued my father during World War II, and I know he hoped to be the first sitting president to visit Australia during his second term. If confirmed, I hope to be able to carry that legacy forward in my own small way. And whenever I come to the Senate, I feel the presence of my Uncle Teddy, whose devotion to this institution, to his colleagues, and to our country was an inspiration to generations of Americans, and whose love and support meant the world to me. I can think of no greater privilege than serving my country abroad. From 2013 to 2017 as ambassador to Japan, I was proud to advocate for American ideals in a country that, like Australia, shares our commitment to democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. I gained broad exposure to the changing dynamics in the Indo-Pacific region, the increasing security tensions and evolving demands on the U.S. military, the rising trade, economic, and climate challenges, the importance of working with U.S. allies and partners, and of building support for people-to-people ties among young generations. These challenges have only become more urgent during the past 5 years. I also appreciated the opportunity to work closely with our talented diplomats and local staff, and I believe all these experiences will help me to be successful if I'm confirmed to this position. Before serving abroad, I worked to make history more accessible and inspire new generations to public service. I spent 10 years working with the New York City public schools to build public-private partnerships, chaired the Harvard Institute of Politics and the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation, which has honored political courage for the past 30 years, including on this committee. The lessons I learned from these experiences and from writing books on the Constitution, poetry, and civics will help me represent the United States in a world where the liberal international order is being undermined, yet American values are more essential than ever. There's no country more committed to these values than our close ally and Five Eyes partner, Australia. Australia has fought with us for the past 100 years, and together we mark the 70th anniversary of the ANZUS Treaty. Our Marines have rotated through Darwin for the past 10 years. Our future security cooperation will build on this strong foundation. Last year, we announced AUKUS, an ambitious 21st century partnership between the United States, the UK, and Australia. If confirmed, I will work hard to further this groundbreaking partnership. Australia is an essential partner in the Quad, among our most significant diplomatic initiatives in the Indo-Pacific. Together with Japan and India, we are engaging in a range of activities to promote a free and open, secure, and resilient Indo-Pacific. These initiatives include health and climate security and emerging technologies. We also partner closely with Australia on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, as well as vaccine deliveries across the Pacific Islands and throughout the region. The United States is Australia's most important economic partner. Our two-way trade has doubled since our free trade agreement went into effect in 2005. We're increasing vital cooperation on critical technologies, rare earth minerals, supply chain resilience, and energy transformation. And as we emerge from the restrictions of the past 2 years, Americans and Australians are eager to resume their in-person ties of friendship and business and study abroad, which are among the closest in the world. If confirmed, I look forward to working with the talented members of Mission Australia to assist these efforts and ensure that the ties between our two countries grow even stronger in the coming years. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Goldberg.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the committee, I'm deeply honored to be here today as the President's nominee to serve as the United States Ambassador to the Republic of Korea. I'm grateful for the confidence shown by President Biden and Secretary Blinken in entrusting me with this important responsibility. And if confirmed, I look forward to working closely with this committee to advance U.S. priorities in the ROK and further strengthen our nearly 7 decades-long alliance. I'm honored to be before this committee for the 6th time as a presidential appointee of both parties, asking for your advice and consent to serve, and deeply appreciate the crucial role Congress plays in the foreign policy process. I want to thank my family watching on or streaming from home, my sister, brothers-in-law, and nieces and nephews for their support and love. I want to thank my colleagues in Bogota, who are no doubt watching, as well as the Korea desk, friends and colleagues around the world who I've worked with for a long time and who protect our interests overseas and the people of the United States every day. I'm honored to be a member of the U.S. Foreign Service. Since 1953, our alliance with the Republic of Korea has been the linchpin of peace, security, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. Forged during the Korean War and the 1953 Mutual Defense Treaty, the U.S.-ROK alliance has evolved into a partnership that is comprehensive and global in nature. If confirmed, my top priority will be to strengthen our ironclad alliance, even as we expand the relationship's regional and global reach. Over the past few years, we have seen Korea act as an important partner in several crises, including in working with the international community to condemn the military coup in Burma and Putin's unprovoked and unjustified war against Ukraine. The ROK has also joined with the United States in addressing other global challenges, such as COVID-19, global democracy, and our shared climate agenda. The United States needs and welcomes a global Korea, not only to tackle the most pressing challenges of the 21st century, but also to seize this century's greatest opportunities. Even as the U.S.-ROK relationship has become a pivotal global partnership, we remain focused on our commitment to protect the ROK from external aggression. The U.S. military personnel stationed in the ROK work closely with the Korean military and United Nations command member countries to deter and defend against the threat from the DPRK, North Korea, and maintain the armistice agreement. If confirmed, I will continue to pursue the President's calibrated approach to achieve our goal of the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. To that end, I would also ensure we continue to consult closely with our Korean, Japanese, and other allies and partners for the full implementation of UN Security Council resolutions while exploring the potential for diplomacy. Our deep economic ties make the U.S.-ROK relationship unique. The Chorus Free Trade Agreement, which just celebrated its 10-year anniversary, remains the bedrock of our economic relationship, and today, Korea is our 6th largest trading partner. Korean investments in the United States create thousands of high-paying jobs, and if confirmed, I will continue to work attracting investment to the United States to create jobs and prosperity for the American worker. A keystone of our relationship is our longstanding people-to-people ties. There are now more than 2 million Americans of Korean descent, and they are members of Congress, senior officials in our military, U.S. diplomats, and business and civil society leaders. More than 1.7 million Koreans have studied in the United States, and approximately 26,000 Koreans have participated in U.S.-sponsored exchanges. The American people benefit from and celebrate Korea's rich culture, everything from traditional hallmarks like the hanbok and kimchi to recent cultural phenomena like BTS and Squid Games. If confirmed, I'll work to ensure the bonds of trust and affection between our people remain strong and vibrant. On March 9th, the ROK held its 8th presidential election since its transition to democracy in 1987. I admire the Korean people's commitment to democracy and congratulate President-elect Yoon on his election. The U.S.-ROK relationship has blossomed thanks to President Biden and President Moon's leadership, and if confirmed, I will work with President-elect Yoon's administration and the Korean people to continue to push forward our shared vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific and a world committed to international rules-based order, democratic principles, and respect for universal human rights. Ranking Member Romney, I would be honored to lead the outstanding men and women of U.S. Mission Korea and to work with our military to strengthen our historic alliance. If confirmed, I look forward to working with Congress to continue shepherding the ever-increasing bonds with the ROK to rise to meet the challenges of the 21st century. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. I see that Senator Padilla is here, and so we're going to turn to him so that he will be able to introduce our nominee to be ambassador to Norway, Mr. Nathanson. Welcome, Senator Padilla, to the committee, and please proceed.
Thank you, Ranking Member Romney, Mr. Chairman in absentia, and members of the committee. I'm glad this worked out. I raced over from EPW to be able to introduce my friend, Mark Nathanson. Proud to introduce him to this committee. He is a fellow Californian, a fellow Angeleno, and President Biden's nominee to serve as United States Ambassador to Norway. As I hope you have become familiar, throughout his decades-long career, Mr. Nathanson has been one of the world's leading communications entrepreneurs as well as a staunch environmentalist. Mr. Nathanson earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Denver and a master's degree from the University of California, Santa Barbara, where he was a National Science Foundation Fellow. In 1975, Mr. Nathanson founded Falcon Cable TV, and in 1999 became vice chairman of Charter Communications. Today, he is chairman of Mapleton Investments and chairman emeritus of Falcon Water Technologies. He has served on the boards of the Annenberg School of Communications at the University of Southern California, as well as UCLA's Anderson School of Management and UCLA Center for Communications Policy. Think about that. You want diplomacy, someone who is liked both on the campuses of UCLA and USC? That speaks volumes. His career has also included public service, working to advance democracy at home and abroad. He was chairman of the United States Agency for Global Media, then called the Broadcasting Board of Governors under both Presidents Clinton and Bush. This global media agency is vital to inform, engage, and connect people around the world in support of freedom and democracy, which is always important, but today even more timely. Through this role, Mr. Nathanson became intimately familiar with the information operations and the importance of countering information and disinformation, which is a key destabilizing tool used by the Kremlin today. Mr. Nathanson has also served as co-chairman of the Pacific Council on International Policy and vice chairman of the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs. All told, Mr. Nathanson has more than 25 years of foreign policy and public diplomacy experience. He's been recognized by several environmental organizations for his work on water conservation and other climate issues. And I'm confident he will aptly represent our values and our national interests in Norway. The United States and Norway share strong democratic values and critical partnerships on a wide range of issues, from combating the climate crisis to strengthening the NATO alliance. I know that in Mr. Nathanson, the United States has a reliable and trusted representative, and I urge his swift confirmation. Thank you again.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. We'll now turn to Mr. Nathanson for his testimony.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, distinguished members of the committee, I'm honored to be here today as the President's nominee to be the U.S. Ambassador to the Kingdom of Norway. Thank you, Senator Padilla, for your gracious introduction and your long friendship. I'm deeply grateful to President Biden and Secretary Blinken for their trust and confidence. If confirmed, I look forward to working closely with Congress to build upon a strong partnership between the United States and Norway. I would like to acknowledge my family, including my 8 grandchildren. My commitment to public service is driven by my love of family, who have motivated me to make our world a better place for future generations. My 2 sons, Adam and David, are here representing their sister Nicole and our family. My eternal gratitude goes to the love of my life, Jane Fallick Nathanson, who I met the first day of college. I would not be here today without Jane's unwavering support for the last 54 years. I spent my professional career in communications and founded my own company, Falcon Cable TV, in 1975, which served communities both domestically and internationally. I later entered government as a member of the Board of Governors of the U.S. Agency for Global Media and became its first chair. I served 7 years in the Senate-confirmed post under both President Clinton and President Bush. In addition, the Secretary of State appointed me to serve on the Board of Governors of the East-West Center in Honolulu, Hawaii. After government service, I joined the board of the National Democratic Institute and became vice chair under Madeleine Albright's leadership. Secretary Albright was a very close friend of mine. We all celebrate her legacy in foreign policy, and we mourn her passing. Throughout my career in government service, I believe I have developed the leadership and diplomatic skills required to represent the United States effectively. Norway is a trusted ally and close friend of the United States. If confirmed, I will work closely with our talented team at Embassy Oslo to strengthen our great relationship with Norway. There are 3 priorities to our work. First, enhancing shared security. If confirmed, my top priority will be the safety and security of Americans in Norway, including mission personnel. Furthermore, I will promote our shared security interest. As a founding NATO ally, Norway has stood with the United States to address a range of emerging threats, including Russia's unprovoked war of choice against Ukraine and threats to European security in general. Norway plays a critical role in patrolling and protecting NATO's northern flank. If confirmed, I will support Norway's effort to strengthen its defense capabilities. Second, upholding global norms and addressing global challenges. The United States and Norway partner to strengthen democracy, promote human rights, and confront many of the world's most pressing issues. As Arctic states, the United States and Norway can together ensure the region remains stable and conflict-free, governed by rules-based international order despite actions by China and other competitors. A key tenet of Norway's foreign policy is humanitarian and development assistance. If confirmed, I will work tirelessly to uphold these important norms in the Arctic and globally. Third, increasing energy, environment, trade, and investment opportunity with a focus on the green transition. Our 2 countries have a long-standing economic ties. Norway is the 2nd largest natural gas exporter to Europe. Norwegian investment in offshore wind near New York will power up to 2 million homes and is an example of cooperation in this energy transition. If confirmed, I will work to promote shared prosperity and combat the climate crisis. I recognize the honor and responsibilities bestowed upon me by the nomination. If confirmed, I will do my best to uphold the trust that you and the American people are placing in me. Thank you again for this opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Carlson.
Chairman Murphy, Ranking Member Romney, and distinguished members of the committee, I am deeply honored to be here today and grateful to President Biden and Secretary Blinken for placing their confidence in me to serve as the next U.S. Ambassador to the Republic of the Philippines. I appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions and hear your thoughts about our relationship with the Philippines, our oldest treaty ally in the Indo-Pacific. If confirmed, I look forward to working with the committee and other members of Congress to advance the interests of the United States, protect our citizens, and strengthen the bilateral relationship. I would like to take a minute to thank some people whose support and guidance have shaped my life in important ways. My parents, George and Kay Loss of Little Rock, Arkansas, who serve as my inspiration and to whom I owe everything, including my sense of public service. My husband, Aubrey, and our daughters, Catherine and Karen, who are the center of my life. I want to also thank the many U.S. Embassy teams with whom I have had the honor to serve over the course of my 37-year career, including the dedicated local staff members who are the backbone of our overseas operations. And to my 3 siblings and other family watching from Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, New York, Connecticut, and California, and mentors, friends, and colleagues around the world, thank you. If confirmed, I would be thrilled to represent our country in the Philippines, a vibrant democratic ally with which we share a long history. Our ties are enriched by the more than 4 million Filipinos and Filipino Americans in the United States and more than 350,000 U.S. citizens who live and work in the Philippines. We must work together to deepen the roots of the long-standing friendship and people-to-people ties between our 2 democracies. We must upgrade and modernize our alliance to face new challenges, expand U.S. trade and investment, and support the rule of law and good governance. The U.S.-Philippines alliance is irreplaceable and foundational to our strategic interests in the Indo-Pacific. The Mutual Defense Treaty that our country signed in 1951 serves as the bedrock of our unwavering commitment to the security of the Philippines. If confirmed, I pledge to continue to expand opportunities for bilateral training, exercises, and capacity building to support the long-term modernization of the armed forces of the Philippines and to advance peace and security in the region. I will also work to ensure our security cooperation continues to help the Philippine military and law enforcement bodies combat terrorism, transnational crime, and violent extremism. Concurrently, I will continue U.S. efforts to urge the Philippine government to conduct all law enforcement operations in accordance with the rule of law and consistent with international human rights standards. And I will urge the government to conduct thorough, transparent investigations into all suspected unlawful killings and to hold accountable those who are guilty. We support the aspirations of millions of Filipinos who want to live in a society characterized by good governance, human rights protections, and the rule of law. If confirmed, I will work to strengthen the administration of justice and support Philippine human rights defenders and civil society, and encourage respect for freedom of expression, including for members of the press. Among the values our 2 democracies share is the respect for international law, which underpins freedoms of navigation and overflight, unimpeded lawful commerce, and the peaceful resolution of disputes in the South China Sea and around the world. If confirmed, I will continue our efforts to bolster Philippine capabilities that enhance maritime domain awareness. The United States seeks to remain a leading trading partner and foreign investor as the Philippines progresses toward economic recovery and upper middle income status. If confirmed, I will support reforms that enhance transparency, assure labor rights protections, boost beneficial trade and investment, and increase cooperation to ensure resilient supply chains. I will promote an economic partnership that engages the U.S. and Philippine private sectors and other stakeholders so that we can invest in climate action and support low-carbon energy security. Finally, let me note that our U.S. embassies overseas are more than places of work. They are communities of people. If confirmed, I will prioritize the safety and well-being of U.S. Embassy Manila's talented staff and families. I will maintain their focus on our top goals and ensure they represent the diverse talents of our democratic societies. Thank you for considering my nomination, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you to all of our witnesses. We'll begin a round of 5-minute questions. I'll start with a few. Ambassador Goldberg, let me start with you. I sometimes worry that American foreign policy has become dangerously sclerotic. We sanction our enemies and we sell weapons to our friends. While other countries that are often adversaries like China or Russia have a much more diverse toolkit at their disposal with which to try to gain influence. You spent some time as the North Korea sanctions coordinator, and you're going to inherit an even more robust set of sanctions on North Korea, given the announcements from the Biden administration in the wake of the latest ballistic missile tests. Just interested to hear your assessment about the efficacy of our sanctions regime, given the fact that Americans with just a passing interest in world affairs haven't helped but notice that these devastating multilateral sanctions haven't seemed to have had any practical impact on the conduct of the North Korean regime. Interested to hear your take on this question.
Senator, I think sanctions work, but they're not a policy in and of themselves. They have to be accompanied by other elements of U.S. And world influence and power. They have to be multilateral without much leakage. In some cases, and in the case of North Korea, the lack of tie-in to the international financial system and trade make it more difficult in some respects, easier in others, to enforce sanctions. You have to have a population that has a say in what is going on in their country. There are other examples of sanctions elsewhere that have worked more quickly to influence public opinion, but there is no public opinion in North Korea. So it's a very difficult, hard target for sanctions. All of that said, North Korea wants those sanctions lifted, which is a reason to keep pressing. Because they want them lifted for a reason, and they want to have their cake and eat it too, in terms of not being forthcoming on negotiations, which we've offered without preconditions. So they are an important element, but they're not an element that will necessarily do the trick by themselves.
Ambassador Kennedy, I wanted to draw for a moment on your experience in Japan. Here's how the editor of one of the most significant Chinese Communist Party-run newspapers described Australia. He said, Australia is chewing gum stuck on the sole of China's shoes. Sometimes you just have to find a stone to rub it off. He said this in the context of a pretty significant row between China and Australia, driven by an increasingly hostile and muscular diplomatic presence and set of activities from the Chinese government inside Australia. And this is, of course, the story all throughout the region. The Chinese are willing to do things and say things, employ more aggressive tactics in a way that they were not 10 to 20 years ago. And I'd just be interested to hear a little bit about what you learned during your time in Japan about the increasingly aggressive diplomatic tactics of the Chinese and how you'll take those learnings to this new job.
I think what I've seen is that the things have really changed and increased in the region, the tensions, since my time in Japan. All the countries out there have dealt with each other for a very long time, but certainly Australia most recently has been challenged by Chinese economic coercion, and I think that the United States can learn a lot from their response. They've stood firm, and I think they've managed to come together with a bipartisan foreign policy, and I think a greater and deeper partnership with us in the security and diplomatic areas, as well as across the board, that will serve our country and theirs well as we move forward into this increasingly tense time in the Indo-Pacific. So I look forward to working with the Australians and with the Japanese to secure a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Did you see an increase in the sort of virulence of these tactics while you were in Japan, or do you think that some of this happened more recently?
I did see it, but I think it has become much more widespread, much more public, much more open. There were the South China Sea issues were certainly present. Some of the economic coercion was certainly happening, but I think all of that has become more dramatic since in the last 5 years.
Great. Senator Romney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Carlson, I think a number of us have been surprised and a little disoriented by the comments made by the current president of the Philippines, the apparent distance he has with the cause of freedom and his closeness to China. Obviously, our nation has worked with the people of the Philippines to provide for safety and security of that nation, and his redirection has been hard to understand. Can you give me a sense from your perspective as to what it is that may have led him to make the departure from our historic relationship that he has, and to what extent you believe that's being welcomed by the people of the Philippines?
Thank you for that question. I think it's important to look at the U.S.-Philippine relationship in its entirety. We are friends, partners, allies with a 75-year history of diplomacy. We're celebrating Thriving at 75 just this year. So with regard to any particular individual, I think the more important thing is to look ahead. We have a strong foundation of shared values with the people of the Philippines. We train with their military very closely, hundreds of training exercises every year, including the Balakatan Premier exercise, which means shoulder to shoulder, which is just finishing up today in the Philippines, where our colleagues across all sectors of society work together, including for freedom of expression and countering Chinese aggression. So I think as we look forward to the next 75 years, there's a lot of room for optimism based on the strong foundations of democracy that exist in the Philippines.
Thank you. Ambassador Kennedy, I think we've been very impressed with the backbone that's been shown by the people of Australia. They banned Huawei products. They have probed the origins of COVID. They participated in a diplomatic boycott of the Olympics as a result of what was being perpetrated against the Uyghur people. In this setting, they're obviously a very small, in terms of population and economy, neighbor of China. We share interests in getting China to behave in a more normal and rules-based way. What is your perception of how Australia might be able to lead an effort to really develop a comprehensive strategy to confront China?
I think Australia and the United States working together is, especially in the Quad with our India friends and with Japan, is a very powerful alliance and combination. And I think that the Australian people have now come together and understanding the challenges posed by China. So I think that we have an opportunity through our partnerships and alliances, working multilaterally throughout the region, to really create a comprehensive strategy that will strengthen deterrence and increase our own security, as well as allowing for the continued prosperity of the region. I think the rules-based order that America has stood behind, working with Australia, has really allowed millions to prosper and provide a great opportunity for Americans. I think that together with Australia, we will continue to deliver on that.
I would note that China has a very comprehensive and, to date, pretty successful strategy to expand their influence in the world, to develop the strongest military in the world, to become the strongest economy in the world. And I'm concerned that we as a nation and even members of the Quad have not settled on what our strategy is to deal with China. Do you agree that China is behaving in a malevolent and predatory way that represents a real threat to our interests here and around the world?
I think the strongest thing that we have is our values and the sense I saw when I was in Japan, how the whole world really still looks to America as the place they want to come to, the place that inspires them. So I feel confident that we do have in our values, in our economic strength, in our security partnerships, our alliances, our multilateral work, that we do have a winning strategy. And I know that Australia and the United States together work side by side to implement that every day. So I'm confident in the United States and in our ability to maintain a free and open and secure and prosperous Indo-Pacific.
Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and to all of the nominees, thank you for your willingness to serve. I'm so thrilled to be here. This really is the A-team, and this conveys a degree of seriousness from the Biden administration and from Secretary Blinken to put its best team on the field in the Indo-Asia Pacific region. So thank you. And Mr. Nathanson, I was just thinking about Secretary Albright and whatever one's views of the afterlife may be. I know she's watching C-SPAN right now and proud of all of you. So thank you very much. My first question is for Ambassador Goldberg, and I want to follow up on what Senator Murphy was asking about, because especially as it relates to CVID, and we've had this conversation, and we had this conversation at the Banking Committee with Bob Corker 6 years ago. We have these we lack intermediate steps, it occurs to me. We have a declaration of where we want to land, complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of the peninsula. Everyone can get behind that. And what's our tool? Well, sanctions. And so that's clearly not working. And so what is the in-between space? How do we do a serious reevaluation of whether or not our bipartisan failure on this issue can be tweaked? And I understand our limitations, and it may just be that this is a hard problem and we have to maintain pressure until the opportunity presents itself, but then we should articulate that. I'm just worried that everyone's too afraid to say CVID is a nice goal, but not anything we can achieve in the next 5 years or even 10 years. And we should have some intermediate steps in the intervening time. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are, and at least I'd like to hear a willingness to reevaluate our policy.
Thank you, Senator. Comprehensive, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. Those are difficult goals, but they fit very well with our non-proliferation goals. They fit with our policy of deterrence, building, broadening, deepening our alliance with the Republic of Korea, and doing all possible to defend against a rogue regime in North Korea that is violating at every opportunity UN resolutions, their own commitments, international agreements. So it is a very difficult problem. If we don't admit it, I'm admitting it here. But it's one that we need to continue to work on and be quite resolute about.
Well, you're not in the position yet, and so I don't expect you to move U.S. foreign policy before confirmation. That's unreasonable and possibly politically dangerous for your confirmation. So I get that. But let's have a real dialogue about what's working and not working. And Senator Murphy said it exactly right. And this goes for the military space, too. People are terrified of going toe-to-toe with us. But in the gray zone, also in the diplomatic gray zone, people are running circles around us. And so we've got to maintain a little bit of flexibility here and try to figure out what we can do to change policy. And that doesn't mean that we're not working towards CVID. It means that we acknowledge that that's not the only thing that we say as it relates to the peninsula. Final question for Ms. Carlson. I think everybody knows I'm for climate action, but I want to focus on a different aspect of climate, which is climate adaptation and specifically preparing for and responding to increasing severity and frequency of natural disasters in the Philippines. That seems to me to be a place that we're already doing very well and bolsters the ties, including the people-to-people ties between the U.S. and the Philippines. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on what more we can do in that space. I think that is both at the humanitarian level an incredibly important priority for the United States, but also it has positive geopolitical implications. I'd like your thoughts.
Thank you very much. I totally agree with what you've just said. If confirmed, I would work to lead our talented embassy team there to find ways that we could work with our friends, partners in the Philippines to enhance their ability to combat climate change. As you know, the Philippines is particularly vulnerable given its long shorelines to climate change. They are subject to typhoons and disasters. Fortunately, our USAID teams and our military Indo-PACOM colleagues have been there to assist in partnership with the Philippines. So it is definitely in our interest to enhance their ability to respond. I'm sure there are very specific things that we can do, and if confirmed, I would look forward to working with you and other members of the committee and in Congress to find ways that we could support climate adaptation in the Philippines for the benefit of both of our countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Senator Haggerty.
Thank you very much, Chair Murphy, and congratulations to all of the nominees today. I'd like to start, if I might, with Ambassador Kennedy to say welcome to your husband, Ed. It's so good to see you again. And Jack, I know that your support has been a great deal to your family's support has been a great deal to your success, and it's great to see you all here today. Ambassador Kennedy, I have several questions, and I know you've got great experience dealing with the Quad partnership from your previous role as ambassador to Japan. I'd love to hear your perspective on how we can further strengthen our relationship with the Quad.
I think the Quad is one of the most important diplomatic initiatives that we have, and it affords a great opportunity for the United States and for our other like-minded democracies to really work together on key issues like COVID, like climate change, like supply chain resilience and security, and new technologies to really strengthen our partnership, preserve the rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific, and advance the United States' interests.
Something's happening in the region right now that I'm sure you're well aware of in the Solomon Islands. The Chinese Communist Party has been very engaged in that region, working with the government of the Solomon Islands. They're stepping in now and talking about constructing a bilateral security agreement. It's very concerning to us as a nation here. I know it's very concerning to the Australians as well. What do you think the prospects are for that bilateral security agreement being entered between China and the Solomon Islands, and what should the United States posture be relative to that?
Well, obviously, I'm not fully read in on that, but if confirmed, I would work very hard. Australia has a very active diplomacy, embassy in every Pacific Island nation, and it's been a historic area of United States engagement as well. And I think that the fact that we are reopening our embassy in the Solomon Islands, that can't come soon enough. I think that together with Australia, with the infrastructure partnership that we have in the Pacific Islands, which I know that you worked to initiate when you were ambassador to Japan, we can do more and we should do more, and we must stay engaged. This is a vital region. And I think that we need to be more visible, but I think that our long record in the region of support and assistance over many years, if we are able to build on that, that we can really make a difference.
I appreciate that. And I think our allies like Australia can be invaluable as we continue to be ever diligent in the region, because we know that the Chinese Communist Party is looking for every opportunity to change the status quo there. So I applaud you and encourage you to find every way possible to work with Australia, and know that people on this committee will be supportive of finding ways again to push back wherever possible. If we could switch now to the AUKUS Trilateral Security Treaty, Security Agreement, I should say. I was encouraged to find out that we're going to be working with our allies to facilitate Australia's nuclear propulsion, submarine propulsion technologies and capabilities. And just 2 days ago, it was announced that we're going to be stepping up that partnership to work with hypersonics and with counter-hypersonics. And my view is that deepening that relationship with Australia from a security perspective is going to be invaluable to our security in the region. I would love to hear your perspective on how you'll work to continue that process.
Well, if confirmed, I look forward to learning more about the details of that partnership. I know that a lot of work is happening now. There are many working groups on all aspects. As you said, it involves the submarines, but it also involves cooperation on AI and quantum and cyber and undersea technologies. And so I think that it is really the kind of partnership that, as it grows and strengthens and we are able to build on it, will deliver great results for both our technological sector and in our American innovation, working together with Australia. And I think that there's a lot of deterrence that it will deliver well before the submarines are in operation.
I think it has great potential, and I appreciate your attention to that arena as well. The technology front will be an important line to follow the confrontation in the region with our greatest strategic adversary, China. I'd like to turn my questions now to nominee Carlson. Mary Kay, you and I have talked about this before, but I'd like to speak with you about nurse visas. As we all know, through the coronavirus pandemic, we've had a severe shortage of nursing talent here in America. It's almost reached a crisis proportion. We've talked about visa interviews by video conference as a means to try to facilitate speeding up what has become a very big backlog at the embassy there in the Philippines. I'd like to get your current assessment of where the backlog is at Embassy Manila, and also what your plan might be to set the metrics to work through that backlog and to get your commitment to report back to me and my staff on how this is progressing.
Thank you, Senator. You have my commitment to continue to work on this very important issue. No one likes a backlog, least of which are our talented team working so hard in the consular section at the U.S. Embassy in Manila. I have spoken after our conversation with a number of folks here in Washington and in the Philippines in our consular section there. And there are ways that we can do everything possible to speed up those interviews. And I pledge to work with you and with the folks here at the National Visa Center and at the embassy to accelerate the processing within the bounds of the U.S. law with regard to immigration.
I look forward to that. As you know, my home state of Tennessee is a hub of hospital management, and we see the problem probably more clearly than any other state in the nation. So this is a crisis. This is something that the American public needs addressed, and I very much appreciate your help in doing so. With respect to the other nominees, I'll submit my questions for the record. Congratulations to all of you again. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to all of you on your nominations. And it's good to see you're all going to countries that voted with the United States to condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I'm sure all of you will be working very hard, if confirmed, to make sure we sustain that pressure given the unprovoked attacks on the people of Ukraine. And I am pleased that right now at the United Nations, our ambassador is seeking a vote to expel Russia from the United Nations Human Rights Council. They have no business being there when they're clearly implicated in war crimes as we speak. Mr. Ambassador Goldberg, if I could just follow up on some questions I think Senator Murphy opened with respect to North Korea and its recent launch of another long-range ICBM. And as you know, for years we've been working to try to tighten the sanctions regime, economic sanctions regime on North Korea, and we repeatedly find leaks in that. We've seen a series of UN reports identifying Chinese entities as the major source of circumventing those economic sanctions. We also know that really China is the sort of big player as North Korea's neighbor and could exert more pressure on the North Koreans with respect to their weapons programs, even though they sometimes have a rocky relationship. My question is this. As we've seen our relations with China get more strained, have we seen China back off on the pressure it's putting on North Korea with respect to constraining their nuclear weapons program, specifically their long-range missile program?
What I can say from public information, Senator, is that the Chinese did not vote to impose further sanctions at the UN, nor did the Russians, of course. So they do have a slightly different approach to the North Koreans and ask for our concessions as opposed to having discussions, negotiations without preconditions. So there is a divergence there. When I was doing the enforcement job of North Korean sanctions, and it was some time ago, it's more than 10 years, there was leakage. And there continues, no doubt, to be leakage. I'm not revealing anything here because I'm not aware of particular cases. But there were issues related to Chinese banks and trade. It is a difficult, as I mentioned earlier, a hard target for sanctions, North Korea. But we do, and we should continue to seek Chinese cooperation, not just on sanctions, which is very important, but sanctions, as I mentioned before, is not a policy in and of themselves, but also their cooperation in moving forward with negotiations and getting back to some sort of discussion about denuclearization and how we're going to handle that issue.
Well, that was my next question. So what, in your view, is the best way forward there in terms of both continue to apply pressure but try to reach the goal of a denuclearized peninsula?
Well, I don't know if it's my good fortune, Senator, but my primary responsibility will be to strengthen the alliance and deterrence and to take other steps to try to convince the North Koreans to return to negotiations, and working very closely with the new President-elect's government. So I would allow Ambassador Sung Kim or people at the State Department to speak more about North Korea policy and the way forward and not preempt their responsibilities.
All right. Ambassador Kennedy, congratulations on this nomination. And with respect to China and Australia, as you well know, they have strong commercial ties, but Australia has appropriately pushed back hard on China's efforts to use coercion by applying economic pressure on political and human rights issues. How do you see the U.S. And Australia working now to push back on China's sort of aggression in the area?
Well, excuse me. I think that pushing back on Chinese economic coercion is something that that the United States is going to have to support our allies and those that are suffering from it, like Lithuania, as well as Australia. Australia has been a model, and they are fortunate, and they have a lot of minerals and critical elements that and a lot of their other exports they have been able to find other markets for. But this is a complicated issue. And the United States and Australia, I think, by working closely together across all aspects of the relationship, whether they're diplomatic, whether they're regional, upholding the centrality of ASEAN, strengthening the Quad, we have a real opportunity here to create and sustain a connected and secure Indo-Pacific. And I think that our alliance is certainly a key element of that, as well as just as our alliances with Korea, Japan, and our work with the Philippines also will help create a region that is more secure and abiding by the rules-based order that has served us all so well.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to all of the nominees on their nominations. This is a very important group of countries that you've been nominated to. Let me start with you, Ambassador Goldberg. I was with the special envoy of the president-elect of South Korea yesterday, with Senator Risch. We had a very interesting conversation. It seems like it will be a rather dramatic shift from the moon policies of the last 4 years. We have a large diaspora in certainly the United States, but in New Jersey, of Korean Americans who have done exceptionally great work, including the Korean American Grassroots Conference. Mr. Kim, I think, is here in the audience. There's a lot of expectation for your confirmation and presence in South Korea, both by the South Koreans and by the community here. So what is your assessment, then, of the recent North Korea cruise and ballistic missile tests? Are you concerned that North Korea may be seeking to up the ante with a bigger provocation? And if so, how should we respond?
Mr. Chairman, the outrageous and continued provocations from the North are, of course, deeply troubling, concerning, and I think our special representative for North Korea, Sung Kim, said just yesterday that we expect more, especially with some of the celebrations upcoming in North Korea. We have to react with enhanced deterrence, with a solid alliance between the United States and South Korea, Japan, and working together to thwart these threats from North Korea. When sanctions are available and enforceable, to also continue with very strong implementation. So we do need to be aware that this could happen and that these provocations, which are illegal, which violate UN resolutions, which violate their own commitments, North Korea's own commitments.
So let me ask you, already the ballistic missile tests are clearly violations of the UN Security Council resolutions. Should we pursue additional sanctions against North Korea?
I mentioned earlier to Senator Van Hollen that my primary responsibility is in the, if confirmed, would be to help in the solidifying the alliance and deterrence and working with our military and other countries. I'm not, strictly speaking, going to be responsible for North Korea policy.
No, but I'm sure the administration would have you on the phone once you're confirmed as part of the interagency process to opine. Don't you think so?
I hope so.
I hope so too, or else I don't know why we're sending you there. It seems to me that there has to be a response. If North Korea can continue to create provocations, can continue to violate Security Council resolutions with impunity, and there is no response, then it will continue to do so, and it will only deepen it.
Well, I think you're right, Mr. Chairman, but I also know that we will take measures, as we have, if it has to be through unilateral action or with our allies after these kinds of provocations, that we can't rely on the United Nations when China and Russia have vetoes at the Security Council.
Let me ask you this. We have historical issues between South Korea and Japan. I recognize them. But we also have the importance of having a close relationship with those two countries and ourselves as ability to meet the regional challenge of North Korea, as well as China and others. Do you see playing a role in helping the South Koreans find a pathway forward with their Japanese counterparts?
Absolutely. I think that is a role, if confirmed, that an ambassador in Seoul would play, working with our ambassador in Japan. They are each other's third largest trading partners. Japan is the biggest investor in South Korea, outstripping the United States. There are reasons that two democratic, technologically advanced, scientifically advanced countries should be working together more, not just on the North Korea issue, which has been an issue where they have come together, but also on other issues regionally and around the world.
One last. Ms. Kennedy, congratulations on your nomination. Appreciate your service in the past to our country. Australia is a microcosm of the global climate crisis. A few weeks ago, Brisbane in East Australia received a record 26 inches of rain in 72 hours. 2022 flooding emergency in Queensland and New South Wales is now $1.4 billion, and it's only the first week of April. The dawn of the COVID-19 pandemic in March of 2020 made it easy to forget, but Australia's wildfires were dominating global headlines until the pandemic took center stage. Those fires cost Australia an estimated $103 billion, and ocean acidification is killing thousands of acres of the Great Barrier Reef. Now, this is an incredibly important relationship, part of the Quad. As a matter of fact, I'll be traveling there this recess. But there are great lessons for the United States to learn to how to prepare for such extreme climate disasters and how to get Australia to think about the climate responsibilities they have as well, in their own interests as well as a global interest. Can I get you to commit to fostering information and strategic exchanges for scientists and disaster responders to learn and share experiences between our two countries?
I think that we should do more of that. I know that that the United States has tried to help where possible. There were firefighters from Wyoming, for example, that went to help during the terrible fires in Australia. But certainly, Australia has learned a lot about these kinds of disasters, and we also have been impacted by fires and floods and storms here in the United States. So the more that we can learn about and learn how to combat and also move toward the clean energy transition and reduce the impacts of climate change, the faster we can do that. If confirmed, I would be eager to work on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have questions for Ms. Carlson and Mr. Nathanson, but I'll submit it for the record. I'm very concerned about Norway in the midst of the challenges of Russia now. It's got its own neighborhood problems, and I look forward to understanding where we're headed with the Philippines in the aftermath of the present administration, hopefully a new dynamic that we can create. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Senator Romney. Mr. Chair, good to be with you and great to be with a wonderful panel. Ms. Kennedy, great to see you again. We've had good interactions in our public service lives, and I'm really thrilled with your nomination. And Ambassador Goldberg, I've really enjoyed visits to Colombia when you've been there. This is a really strong panel. Let me start with Ms. Carlson. Here's a worry of mine, press freedom. Reporters Without Borders ranked the Philippines 138th out of 180 countries in the most recent World Press Freedom Index. And attacks on the media have escalated under President Duterte, but even prior, the Philippines has long been one of the most dangerous countries in the world for journalists. The country has also one of the highest impunity rates in the world, with no one being held accountable in more than 80% of journalist murders over the last 10 years. Earlier this week, a number of us met with Maria Ressa, an investigative journalist and Filipina who is the founder of the online news site Rappler. She won the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize for her courageous reporting about abuses of power, uses of violence, and authoritarianism in the Philippines. Ahead of the national elections in the Philippines in May, the Filipino government has stepped up its harassment of both Maria Ressa and Rappler. If confirmed, how will you work to strengthen freedom of expression in the Philippines?
U.S. policy toward the Philippines is based on our shared values of rule of law, democracy, freedom of expression. And as we are seeing around the world, there's a rise in authoritarianism, which we need to work together with our like-minded partners in civil society and in government in the Philippines to counter, which is why I was really pleased to see that the Philippines participated in the Summit of Democracy and the year-long commitments that are being made, resulting in another summit coming up at the end of this year. So if confirmed, I would continue the work that our colleagues at the embassy are doing to work with all levels of civil society, including and especially journalists, including Maria Ressa and other members of the press who are struggling to tell the story so that we can combat disinformation and make sure that the truth is told about what is happening not only in the Philippines, but in other democracies around the world.
Thank you very much. I have a piece of bipartisan legislation with Senator Graham, the International Press Freedom Act, previously been introduced. We're working with the State Department on it now to make it even better, and I would hope to be able to get support of my colleagues on this committee for having a markup and improve that bill and get it out. The bill would provide resources to the State Department to amplify our efforts to protect journalists and include a special visa category that would enable threatened journalists to seek safe haven in the United States or other nations. Mr. Nathanson, and I suspect questions have been asked about this when I've been out of the room, but congratulations to you. Norway, what a great ally, a nation that's doing so many things right. They're trying to maintain strong energy production so that Europeans can have an energy source nearby that is not Russia, and I applaud them for that. If they can do more, I hope you will encourage them to do more. I know President Zelensky has been encouraging them, but one of the interesting things about Norway is that they've had a tradition of not sending weapons into non-NATO countries, and yet they're being such a strong supporter of the global democracy's efforts in Ukraine. They've shipped about 2,000 M72 anti-tank weapons, and recently, that's the latest shipment. The total number is now in excess of 4,000. And this is a dramatic change in direction from a policy that was in place since the 1950s of not sending arms to non-NATO countries that are at war. Talk a little bit about your understanding for how Norway is reassessing the relationship with Russia and their role not only with NATO, but more broadly for European security as the result of Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine.
As you said, Senator, and I appreciate the question, Norway is reassessing its relationship with its neighbor, Russia. They have a 121-mile border in the Arctic with Russia. But the Arctic Council, which Russia is a member of, 7 other nations in the Arctic Council have condemned Russia's unprovoked attack in Ukraine. And the Arctic Council is now at a standstill because of this. So Norway, as a leader in the Arctic area, is reassessing its own position with Russia and looking very seriously at the future with Russia. They recently expelled 3 Russian diplomats. As you said, they have broken a long tradition of Norway by sending arms to Ukraine as well as financial aid. And if confirmed, I will continue to work with Norway to reassess their attitude and their positions as it relates to Russia.
Thank you. Senator Cruz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to each of the nominees. Congratulations on your nominations. Ambassador Kennedy, thank you for your willingness to be here. Thank you for your service. A few weeks ago, you and I had a very good conversation in my office about the threat that China poses to American national security and, indeed, global peace. Our efforts to counter China have been institutionalized in a number of frameworks, and in recent years in the Quad with Australia, India, Japan, and the United States. I believe that the Quad is a critical and invaluable strategic asset. I know that our regional partners believe so as well. On Saturday, Australia and India signed an interim trade deal to reduce dependence on Chinese supply lines. It was rightly hailed on all sides as a major accomplishment of the Quad framework. I'd like to get your views on that issue and the role you envision the Quad playing and Australia within the Quad.
Thank you, Senator. It's nice to see you again. I agree that the Quad is an ambitious and extremely important diplomatic initiative. I think it's important that it includes initiatives that will benefit the health and prosperity of millions of people in the region across the board, whether it's delivering vaccines and planning for the effects of climate change, as well as securing our supply lines, investing in critical minerals. There are working groups on many, many different areas. So I think that by our four democracies working closely together, we will be able to advance the administration's goal of a free and open, secure, prosperous Indo-Pacific. We also have the AUKUS partnership, which is an incredibly important security initiative, which is being developed as well, and I think that will also help secure the region and for years to come.
Well, I'm heartened to hear that, but candidly, I worry that the views you articulated are not shared across the Biden administration. I've been in particular troubled by reports that the administration is considering imposing CAATSA sanctions on India. As recently as last month, U.S. diplomats have reiterated that the administration is considering imposing those sanctions. I find such talk inexplicable, let alone the possibility of actually following through and sanctioning India. India is the world's largest democracy. They are a key ally. They are in the midst of an historic pivot towards the United States, and the Biden administration seems to be actively working to alienate them and push India towards Russia and China. Ambassador Kennedy, you just said rightly that you consider an important part of your job strengthening the Quad. What effect do you think imposing sanctions on India would have on your efforts to strengthen the Quad, and will they make them more likely or less likely to accomplish your goals?
Senator, I'm hopefully going to be confirmed as ambassador to Australia, and I honestly, I would look forward to learning more about that, but I do not have any information on that today.
So you don't have any views on whether the United States sanctioning India would make it harder for the Quad to work together effectively?
I would want to study up on that and talk to you about it some more, because I'm not familiar with the instances that you referenced.
Well, I will say we have all agreed the Quad was a major strategic step forward, and an alliance between Australia, India, Japan, and the United States is a critical way to press back on China. And if the Biden administration decides instead to treat India as a hostile country subject to sanctions, it would be spectacularly foolish. And it is part and parcel of what has been a consistent pattern of demonstrating weakness and appeasement to our enemies and alienating our friends. I speak with allies of America across the globe who say over and over again they don't understand why the Biden administration treats them so badly, and they wonder sometimes, ironically, would they be treated better if they behaved as enemies to America? And if you are confirmed, I hope that you serve as a voice of reason in this administration and counsel against the Biden administration sanctioning important allies of America, such as India.
Senator Coons.
Thank you, Senator Murphy, Senator Romney. Great to be with all of you. Rather than relitigating relationships with allies across the current and previous administration with my colleague, I'm going to try and point us in a forward direction, as tempting as that engagement might be. For Caroline, for Ms. Kennedy, for Mr. Goldberg, Ms. Carlson, great to have all of you in front of us. Forgive me. I am very interested in the next steps in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. It has, I think, the potential to deepen our economic engagement in the Indo-Pacific. The administration's been clear that this framework, as imagined, won't include new market access commitments. Some of our regional partners have expressed disappointment in this, and I'm hoping to work with some of my colleagues on this committee to find other ways to make this framework beneficial to U.S. workers and trading partners as the nominees to serve as our nation's representatives to Australia, South Korea, and the Philippines. How would each of you work to make the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework a success with those governments? And then second, if I might, all three countries, South Korea, Australia, and the Philippines, have been subject to punitive economic coercion at the hands of the PRC. I think we have to find a way to help countries. I was recently in Lithuania with Senator Durbin. Lithuania, because of a choice they made, has ended up being on the receiving end of economic coercion from China. South Korea, Australia, and the Philippines have as well. Would you be willing to work with me and others on this committee as we try and develop other tools in addition to the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework to help our allies and partners stand up to economic bullying? So, two-part question, if we could. Ms. Kennedy first.
Thank you, Senator. It's nice to see you. With regard to the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, the one thing that I know from my time in Japan and I have learned during this process is that the United States economic engagement is something that the region is very much eager for. And so if confirmed, I would work hard to increase our economic engagement with Australia and the Pacific Islands, as well as any place else that my assistance could be helpful. I think that it's a great opportunity. I saw when I was in Japan how much opportunity there is for Americans in the Indo-Pacific, and I think it's something that, because it's far away, people don't always realize. But we are active there, and there's a great deal of opportunity for the future. I think the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework has a great deal of potential in the digital area to create high standards and high labor and environmental standards as well. So I think that that there's a great deal of anticipation and enthusiasm for this framework, and it will be a first step that we can build on going forward.
Thank you, Ambassador Kennedy, and I appreciate also your recognition of the key role that some of the island states in the Pacific can play. There was just a hearing previous this week on the tuna treaty. There is some ongoing challenges in terms of COVID and economic pressure on Palau, Kiribati, and others, and would welcome your advice and engagement on that work as well. Ambassador Goldberg, great to see you again. Really enjoyed our time together in Colombia, an absolutely critical nation that is about to face a significant election, and I'm excited you've been nominated for this very central role in our Indo-Pacific strategy. I look forward to your answers to my compound question.
Thank you, Senator Coons. Good to see you again. The Indo-Pacific is, as Ambassador Kennedy mentioned, in search of American leadership on economic issues as much as on military and security issues. So it's a key area that we need to develop. And South Korea has some outward-looking programs working with us in the Indo-Pacific, a Southern policy started by President Moon that I have little doubt will be continued under President-elect Yoon, and has a lot to offer in the areas of digitalized economy and infrastructure and the kinds of outward-looking programs that we anticipate with the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. On the PRC, clearly we're going to work with friends, partners, allies on supply chains, making all of ourselves less dependent on China. In the case of the Republic of Korea, there are investments being made here in the United States for electric batteries, for semiconductors. There's a lot we can do in artificial intelligence. There are all kinds of areas we can work with the ROK to help also limit dependence on China. And those are things we need to work on together, and if confirmed, would be very, very anxious to do so.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ms. Carlson.
Thank you. I guess I would start with the question of what are we doing right in this area? And I think if we look at the Philippines, we're doing a lot right. We have very vibrant trade and investment relationships going both ways. And if confirmed, I would work to strengthen those relationships. Before the pandemic, the Philippines was one of the fastest growing economies in the region. There's a great deal of potential. My colleagues have already mentioned a number of the areas in high tech, and also we have the importance of the supply chains that we want to work on the Philippines with. And I think if we look at our values, we are focused on transparency and predictability in the area of economic development. And I think that is our real strength when we compare ourselves and when others compare us to our competitors.
Mr. Chairman, would you tolerate me asking one more question? Thank you. Mr. Nathanson, it's great to see you. Excited you've been nominated for this important relationship with the Kingdom of Norway. They're a key partner, a NATO ally, long and deep relationship, in no small part because of the significant diaspora community here. I'd just be interested in your thoughts on what that relationship looks like now after the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the renewed focus on European collective security. How's our defense cooperation shifted, and how might it further shift, including through the Supplementary Defense Cooperation Agreement? And anything you care to share about the Nordic nations and their relationships with us, which might shift. Norway has long enjoyed active participation in NATO, but their neighbors to the east have so far declined to pursue that. I wondered if you thought that was something that might end up being in your bailiwick as our ambassador, if confirmed.
Nice to see you again, Senator Coons. I believe our relationship with Norway, because of Russia's actions in the Ukraine, has only strengthened. Norway has announced increased spending for both NATO and its own military defenses. We have encouraged that. If confirmed, I would work with Norway and our military leaders to make sure that they are strong and that the northern border, which borders Russia in the Arctic, which they call the High North, is even stronger than it is today. Norway is very concerned about this. They continue to be very focused on it. And I think, hopefully, they will work with their neighbors to be more aware. In recent exercises where over 30,000 American and troops from 27 other countries participated in the Arctic, both Finland and Sweden also participated. I think this was an excellent sign, and I think we can see Norway working with its neighbors in Finland and Sweden and Denmark and Iceland to even work more together in military defenses of the Nordic nations.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Coons. I just have a few additional questions, we'd be happy to entertain a short second round before we let you all go. We have one more vote pending. Ms. Carlson, wanted to drill down a little bit more on this tension we have with the Philippines. You've talked appropriately about the scope of our defense and security partnership. We see them as a key friend and ally as we seek to address China's designs to expand their influence in the region. But listen, we can't look the other way when reportedly up to 20,000 or more people have died since President Duterte came to office, many of them outside of any formal legal process. This is a stunning turn of events in the Philippines. I tend to think that at this moment in time, when we see this war being waged on democracy around the world, we should err on the side of human rights and democracy when we have a conflict between security and rule of law. And what I have found in my brief time on this committee is that oftentimes ambassadors who are charged with maintaining a good relationship with the home country are often not on the leading edge of recommending policies that will get tougher, that may change the nature of our relationship as a means to send a message about how much we value human rights, the rule of law, and democracy. And so you talked about your willingness to step up and assert our interests when it comes to protecting the rights of human beings in the Philippines. But what are the tools that are at your disposal? Is it enough to just occasionally raise issues in private meetings? What else can a good, thoughtful, capable ambassador do? What tools do you have? What tools do you need in order to do more than just raise objections?
Thank you very much. I will commit here to say it's more than just a willingness. You have my commitment that if confirmed, I will raise those tough issues that you just mentioned. Human rights, respect for human rights is fundamental to the U.S.-Philippine relationship. We have ongoing conversations all the time about these hard questions. Friends, partners, allies know how to have those tough conversations. We don't always see the results that we want, but we continue to have the conversations. Some of the tools that we have in our foreign policy toolkit are, for example, Leahy sanctions. We make sure that we do not give any assistance to any bodies, any foreign, police or military entities that engage in gross violations of human rights. That's one tool that we have. With our, anytime that we export arms, we make sure that none of those firearms go to entities that have violated human rights. So we continue to actively monitor human rights abuses and have those difficult conversations with all sectors of the government. At the same time, we work in close concert with civil society organizations. Senator Coons just mentioned, I believe, the conversation with, somebody did, with our visiting journalist Maria Ressa from the Philippines. And if confirmed, I would continue to have those conversations across the civil society bodies and with the government, and use every tool at our disposal to make sure that as friends and partners, we continue together to promote our shared values.
I appreciate that answer. It's a strong one. And I know these decisions are sort of above your level of responsibility, but for the record, we don't have a very good record of refraining from security sales and arms sales to countries with pretty miserable records on human rights, whether it be the UAE, the Saudis, the Egyptians. I think right now we have that balance incorrect. I look forward to working with you on this. One last question for you, Mr. Goldberg. You had a really remarkable diplomatic career. This is going to be your third posting as an ambassador. You served as a charge in a number of places. We're having a really hard time confirming ambassadors here. In fact, it's stunning how difficult it is to get career public servants in ambassadorial posts. And it seems to be many of my colleagues are pretty blasé about the effects of that, the impact of it. And I can understand that to an extent because our chargés are remarkable. They do great work. But it strikes me that there's a big difference between having an ambassador and having a chargé. And you have sort of seen that difference. And so I'd just love to get your candid thoughts before the committee as to, why it's important to have ambassadors in key countries and what the difference is between that and having a chargé.
I very much appreciate the chance to do so, Senator Murphy. Having a career or non-career ambassador confirmed by this body, nominated by the President, brings a prestige and authority that a chargé cannot really fully have. I was a non-confirmed chief of mission in Kosovo many years ago when it was being administered by the United Nations, and because of the United States image in Kosovo, it brought a great deal of authority. But still, when you're dealing with other parts of our government, as much as the government to which you are accredited, you don't have the same voice and the same kind of authority to speak about issues. We all have been nominated by President Biden for these jobs. We're looking to you for confirmation, and that in and of itself is an important indicator to another government. Access is another issue. There are a lot of foreign governments that don't want to necessarily meet at a very high level with chargés, and so that's an important point as well. So I do believe we need our ambassadors in place. We need them to do their work and to carry out the business of our foreign policy.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Senator Romney? Good. Well, thank you all for your testimony today. We look forward to getting you on the job as quickly as possible. We're going to keep the hearing record open until 5 o'clock tomorrow for additional questions for the record. And with that, this